What do you think is the worst thing to find after a grueling 72-hour shift? A messy house. Unpaid bills? No. The worst is discovering your own blood relatives stripping your safe haven bare, ready to sell your future to satisfy their bottomless greed. Welcome. Today I bring you a tale of ultimate betrayal and the coldest payback you will ever hear. If family has ever used you, sit down. These villains paid a price worse than prison. Hello, everyone. Before today's story begins, we'd like to share a quick message. YouTube recently removed our monetization, cutting off our income. If you enjoy this story, we humbly ask for just $1 to help pay our staff so they can make a living and keep creating for you. Thank you for saving us. Now let's begin the story. My name is Taylor Boyd. I am 34 years old and a senior software architect at Nexus Core Dynamics. For the past 72 hours, I had been surviving on stale coffee and pure adrenaline. A critical server vulnerability had threatened to compromise our entire network, and it fell on my shoulders to patch the breach. By the time I finally pulled into the driveway of my quiet suburban home in Seattle, every muscle in my body ached. The relentless gray drizzle of the Pacific Northwest matched my exhaustion perfectly. All I wanted was to kick off my shoes, take a hot shower, and sleep for at least 12 hours straight. I dragged my feet up the porch steps, the heavy weight of the past 3 days pressing down on me. I unlocked the front door, expecting the comforting warmth of my sanctuary. Instead, the moment the heavy oak door swung open, a chilling sound pierced the silence of the house. It was my 15-year-old daughter, Chloe. She was sobbing uncontrollably. The sound echoed from the upstairs hallway, sharp and filled with absolute distress. My maternal instincts instantly overpowered my crushing fatigue. The heavy bags under my eyes seemed to vanish as a surge of pure panic flooded my veins. I dropped my briefcase on the hardwood floor with a loud thud and took the stairs 2 at a time, my mind racing through terrifying scenarios. Was she hurt? Did someone break in? I reached the second-floor landing and slid to a halt. Chloe was huddled in the corner of the hallway, her knees pulled up to her chest, tears streaming down her face. Physically, she was entirely untouched. No one had laid a finger on her, but her eyes were fixed in pure horror on the open doorway of my home office. I stepped past her, my fists clenched, ready to fight whatever intruder had dared to enter my home. But the intruders were not strangers in ski masks. They were the people who shared my blood. My own mother and father were tearing through my filing cabinets, throwing confidential documents recklessly over their shoulders. My older sister Harper was ripping books off the shelves, frantically shaking them. And there, standing in the center of the devastation, was Harper's husband, my brother-in-law, Marcus. The room was completely unrecognizable. But the sight that made my blood run freezing cold was the shattered mess of metal glass and glowing wires on the floor. It was Chloe's custom-built personal computer. She and I had spent over 200 hours sourcing the parts and building that machine together. It was her pride and joy, a masterpiece of cooling loops and high-end graphics cards. Now it was violently stomped to pieces, carelessly tossed aside by my family, as if it were garbage blocking their path. They had destroyed my daughter's sanctuary without a single second of hesitation. They were not looking for cash. They were not searching for the deed to my house or my emergency jewelry. I knew exactly what they were hunting for. Over in the corner, the heavy steel door of my hidden wall safe had been pried open. Inside that safe was a specialized military-grade encrypted hard drive. That drive contained the complete, uncompiled source code for a groundbreaking artificial intelligence project I had been developing for Nexus Core Dynamics. It was an algorithm capable of revolutionizing deep learning predictive models. On the legitimate market, it was priceless. On the Silicon Valley black market to the right, corrupt buyer, that raw code was easily worth tens of millions of dollars. My family was literally trying to steal my life's work, my career and my future, all to line their own pockets. Any normal person would have screamed. Any normal daughter or sister would have burst into the room demanding answers, crying in betrayal. but I am a tech crisis manager. I spend my life analyzing catastrophic threats and neutralizing them with surgical precision. The hot rage bubbling in my chest instantly flash froze into pure calculating ice. I took a silent step backward, pressing my back against the wall in the dark hallway blind spot. I raised my left wrist. With 3 quick taps on the screen of my smartwatch, I silently overrode the home network and activated every single hidden security camera inside the office. The tiny red recording lights blinked to life entirely unnoticed by the frantic thieves. I watched the live feed on my watch face. Marcus let out a triumphant gasp. He reached into the back of the dismantled safe and pulled out a heavy metal-cased hard drive. "I got it. Let's get out of here," he hissed, his eyes wide with greed. He smugly shoved the device deep into the inside pocket of his jacket, acting as if he had just won the lottery. Harper and my parents immediately dropped what they were holding, their faces lighting up with sickening relief and victory. Standing in the shadows, I did not panic. I did not feel fear. Instead, a slow, dark smirk crept across my face. The drive Marcus just stuffed into his coat was not the original artificial intelligence source code. It was a honeypot. It was a decoy drive I had engineered myself, loaded with highly aggressive military-grade tracking malware designed to completely infect and monitor any machine it touched. They thought they had stolen the golden goose. In reality, they had just swallowed a digital hand grenade. It was time to end this pathetic home invasion. I reached out and grabbed the heavy, solid steel handle of a golf umbrella resting in the hallway stand. I stepped out of the shadows, planting myself firmly in the doorway. I swung the umbrella hard, striking the metal doorframe with a deafening, piercing crack that echoed through the entire house. The 4 of them jumped out of their skins, spinning around with wide, terrified eyes. The color instantly drained from their faces as they saw me standing there. "Put your hands where I can see them," I said, my voice dangerously calm. I pulled my phone from my pocket and held it up. "You have exactly 10 seconds to get out of my house before I dial 911 and have the local police arrest you for breaking and entering, destruction of property, and grand larceny." 10, 9, 8. Panic erupted. My mother tried to stutter an excuse, but Marcus shoved past her, desperate to escape. They practically trampled each other in their rush to get out of the room. They sprinted down the stairs and out the front door, leaving my house in absolute furious silence. The heavy oak front door slammed shut, rattling the window panes and sealing the chaos outside. I immediately dropped the heavy umbrella and rushed back up the stairs. Chloe was still on the hallway floor, trembling like a leaf in the cold. I knelt down, wrapping my arms around her and pulling her tightly into my chest. I rested my chin on the top of her head. "I am so sorry, sweetie. Are you okay?" I whispered, my voice softening, completely shedding the icy exterior of the crisis manager. She nodded against my shoulder, sobbing about the shattered graphics cards and broken cooling tubes scattered across the room. I pulled back and looked directly into her tear-filled eyes, wiping her cheeks with my thumbs. "Listen to me, Chloe. That machine was just hardware. I promise you they are going to pay for every single broken wire 100 times over. I will make sure of it. But right now, we need to get you out of this house." I quickly packed her a weekend bag with her favorite clothes and drove her straight across town to the home of Sarah, a trusted senior engineer on my development team. I knew Chloe would be completely safe and comfortably distracted there. With my daughter securely relocated, I drove back through the heavy Seattle rain. The maternal warmth I had shown her vanished the exact second I stepped back into my ruined home office. I was no longer just a comforting mother. I was a software architect defending my digital fortress. I callously pushed the debris off my standing desk, plugged in my secure encrypted backup laptop, and immediately established an isolated air-gapped firewall to protect the rest of my home network. My fingers flew rapidly across the mechanical keyboard, entering strings of complex commands. Within 45 seconds, I brought up the covert tracking dashboard for the stolen honeypot drive. A bright crimson beacon pinged on the dark map interface of my screen. Marcus was currently speeding down Interstate 5 heading south. The military-grade malware I had embedded in the drive's firmware was already aggressively logging his exact coordinates, his device ping rates, and every single network access attempt his phone made in the car. He was completely blind to the invisible digital leash I had tightly wrapped around his neck. I picked up my smartphone and dialed the only person who matched my level of tactical ruthlessness. Vance was not just my closest friend since our university days. He was widely recognized as one of the most brilliant and aggressive corporate defense attorneys on the West Coast. He answered on the second ring, the sound of classical music playing softly in the background. "Taylor, tell me why you are calling me on a Friday evening instead of sleeping off that server crash," he said, his voice sharp, analytical, and instantly alert. "Vance, we have a code red," I replied evenly, staring at the blinking red dot on my screen. "My family just broke into my house and stole what they firmly believe is the uncompiled artificial intelligence source code for Nexus Core Dynamics. I need you on the clock right this very second." There was a brief, heavy silence on the line before he exhaled a sharp breath. "I am grabbing my secure laptop. Talk to me." As Vance logged into our heavily encrypted virtual chat room, we quickly started piecing the ugly puzzle together. Marcus had been running a failing tech startup for the past 2 years. Vance pulled up the public financial filings and whistled softly through the speakerphone. "Taylor, your brother-in-law is drowning in debt," Vance explained. "He took close to $5 million from some very aggressive, unregulated venture capitalists. His monthly burn rate is catastrophic. He is maybe 3 weeks away from declaring total bankruptcy." The picture became crystal clear. Marcus was desperate and cornered. He planned to steal my groundbreaking project and sell the raw code to a rival tech conglomerate to wipe out his massive, crushing debt. But the puzzle still had a deeply disturbing missing piece. Why would my own parents, two people who barely understood how to restart a wireless router, help him smash open a hidden wall safe? I opened the audio logs from the hidden security cameras that had recorded right before I interrupted their little heist. I played the uncompressed file for Vance. My mother's frantic, hushed voice filled my silent office. "Hurry up, Marcus. If we do not get this code, the bank is going to take our house. We gave you our entire retirement fund." My stomach churned with absolute disgust. That was the sickening, pathetic truth. My parents had foolishly mortgaged their entire life savings to fund Marcus's doomed startup. Instead of accepting the consequences of their massive financial stupidity, they decided to completely destroy my career, my reputation, and my future to save themselves. They were entirely willing to sacrifice my livelihood to feed their bottomless greed. "They think they can treat this like a simple family squabble," I said, my tone completely devoid of any remaining familial affection. "They think they can just cry, apologize later, and force me to forgive them." Vance let out a low, dark chuckle that sent a shiver down my spine. "Oh, they are about to learn a very hard, very permanent lesson about intellectual property law." "Are we calling the local police precinct?" "Absolutely not," I answered immediately. Local police officers would just see a messy domestic dispute, some broken furniture and a stolen hard drive. They would tell us to sort it out in civil court. We were aiming much, much higher than local law enforcement. High-tech intellectual property theft, especially involving advanced artificial intelligence systems, falls strictly under federal jurisdiction. Vance, I want you to start drafting a comprehensive legal dossier. We are taking this straight to the Cyber Division of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We are going to turn their little family robbery into a federal economic espionage case. I want them buried so deep they never see daylight again. By 8 o'clock the next morning, my phone began vibrating continuously against the kitchen counter. Marcus had finally plugged the stolen drive into his computer. He had quickly discovered that my security protocols were not something a desperate amateur startup founder could simply bypass. He was completely locked out by a wall of military-grade encryption. The text messages flooded my screen, rapid and furious. He demanded the password immediately. When I did not reply within 5 minutes, his panic morphed into sheer, unadulterated arrogance. He typed, You are legally obligated to hand over the key. Do not make me sue you for family investment fraud. You are hiding assets that belong to this family." The sheer delusion of a man threatening to sue me for the very thing he had just stolen from my home was almost laughable. But the assault did not stop there. Next came the audio barrages from my mother and father. I sat at my kitchen island quietly sipping my black coffee and listened to 6 separate, incredibly toxic voicemails. My mother wept hysterically into the receiver, perfectly playing the ultimate victim. She sobbed, "You are an ungrateful, cold-blooded monster. You are driving your own flesh and blood into homelessness and absolute ruin just to protect a bunch of mindless computer code." My father took a much harsher route. His voice boomed through the small speaker, screaming that I owed them for raising me, that my entire career was built on their sacrifices, and that holding back this money was an act of pure evil. They completely ignored the shattered glass in my office. They entirely ignored the fact that they had broken into my home and traumatized their own teenage granddaughter. To them, I was the sole villain for not passively letting them steal my life's work. Listening to the people who gave you life demand your destruction is a deeply surreal experience. It completely burns away any lingering guilt or affection you might have left. Normally, I would have blocked their numbers instantly, but I was no longer operating alone. Sitting directly across from me at my kitchen table was Special Agent Reynolds from the Cyber Division of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Vance's late-night legal dossier had worked flawlessly. Given the immense financial value of the artificial intelligence project and the severe potential for foreign corporate espionage, the Bureau had mobilized within 12 hours. Agent Reynolds, a sharp, intensely focused woman in a dark gray suit, listened to the voicemails with a completely stoic expression. She instructed me to lean heavily into their narrative. I needed to make them believe their emotional abuse was working perfectly. I needed to play the broken, submissive daughter who was crumbling under the weight of their disappointment. Under the federal agent's careful guidance, I drafted my response to Marcus. I purposely misspelled several words. I used a frantic, deeply defeated tone. I told him I was terrified that I could not handle the stress of the entire family hating me and that my mental health was completely shattering under the immense pressure. I painted a flawless picture of total pathetic surrender. I sent the message agreeing to provide the decryption password in person, but I attached one strict condition. I told Marcus he had to sign a comprehensive ironclad non-disclosure agreement officially stating that he, my sister, and my parents would never contact me or Chloe ever again. I framed it as a desperate, tearful plea for peace. Blinded by his own towering ego and the desperate thrill of impending wealth, Marcus took the bait without a single second of hesitation. He replied with a smug, highly condescending text telling me it was about time I grew up and acted like a real team player. He agreed to the legal terms immediately. We scheduled the handover for 10 o'clock on Friday morning. Marcus insisted on booking a highly visible luxury glass conference room in a premium corporate center downtown. He desperately wanted to feel like a powerful executive closing a massive multi-million-dollar acquisition. He wanted a grand stage for his final victory over me. What Marcus, my sister, and my parents completely failed to realize was that the Friday meeting was nothing more than a theatrical formality. The real catastrophic damage was already being done in total silence. While Marcus was busy gloating and booking expensive conference rooms, my decoy drive was actively destroying his life from the inside out. The exact moment he had connected the honeypot to his laptop that morning, the hidden digital beacon had awakened. It did not just sit there waiting for a password. It aggressively went to work. It silently bypassed his rudimentary firewalls and established a secure encrypted tunnel directly to the Federal Bureau of Investigation data centers. It was rapidly siphoning every single byte of data he possessed. The drive downloaded his entire contact list, his private email archives, and most importantly, the highly illegal, heavily encrypted chat logs, where he had been actively brokering the sale of my stolen source code to a rival foreign tech conglomerate. The federal agents watched in real time as Marcus negotiated a massive payout for technology he did not even begin to understand. Every single deleted message, every shady offshore financial transaction, every piece of undeniable damning proof was being neatly packaged and cataloged by federal cyber analysts. Marcus was strutting around like a tech genius who had just won the game of the century. He thought he had backed a weak, defenseless woman into a corner. In reality, he was a dead man walking a pathetic fish flopping happily on the chopping block, entirely unaware that the butcher's knife was already falling. The tension continued to escalate rapidly on Thursday, exactly 1 day before the scheduled meeting. My sister Harper has always been a malicious opportunist. When she realized that I was completely ignoring her demanding text messages, she decided to change her tactics. She thought she could use my 15-year-old daughter as a psychological hostage. That afternoon, Harper aggressively marched into the main office of Chloe's high school demanding to pull her niece out of class for a fabricated family emergency. Harper wanted to corner my child, terrify her, and use her tears to force me into total submission. But I am a crisis manager. I am always 3 steps ahead of a predictable threat. I had already officially withdrawn Chloe from her classes 2 days prior. Using a portion of my emergency savings, I had rented a highly secluded private villa surrounded by 24/7 armed security. Chloe was perfectly safe spending her afternoon swimming in a private pool, completely oblivious to the toxic storm raging outside. When Harper discovered that her prey had vanished, she absolutely lost her mind. My phone rang violently. I answered and immediately pressed the record button. Harper's voice was a shrill, hysterical screech that forced me to hold the phone away from my ear. "Where is she, Taylor? You think you can hide that spoiled little brat from us?" Harper screamed, her words dripping with pure venom. "You better stop playing these stupid games and give Marcus that password right now, or I swear I will make your daughter's life a living hell. I will find her, and I will make sure she pays for your arrogant stupidity." I did not interrupt her. I let her rant, letting her dig her own grave deeper with every single word. I ended the call in silence and immediately forwarded the pristine audio file to Agent Reynolds. The federal agent simply nodded her head and calmly added a brand new, highly severe federal charge to my sister's growing file: felony witness intimidation. Friday morning arrived with a heavy, oppressive, overcast sky. The meeting was set for exactly 10 o'clock at a premium executive center located in the financial district of downtown Seattle. Before I left my house, Agent Reynolds carefully fastened a microscopic high-definition recording device to the second button of my silk blouse. It was directly linked to a tactical team waiting in the room adjacent to our meeting spot. I purposefully styled my hair to look disheveled. I skipped my makeup routine to let the dark, exhausted circles under my eyes show prominently. I practiced my trembling hands. I had to look like a completely defeated woman walking into a slaughterhouse. When I pushed open the heavy glass door of the luxury conference room, the scene inside was sickening. Marcus Harper and my parents were seated around the massive mahogany table, radiating the unbearable arrogance of absolute victors. Marcus was wearing a brand new, sharply tailored suit, clearly bought on credit to match his delusional fantasy of becoming a tech billionaire. My parents were casually sipping expensive artisan coffees, chatting happily with Harper as if they were waiting for a pleasant family brunch. The moment I walked in, all 4 of them stopped talking and stared at me. The smug, condescending smiles on their faces made my stomach turn. Marcus did not even bother to stand up. He simply leaned back in his leather chair, pulled a thick stack of papers from his leather briefcase, and tossed it carelessly across the polished wooden table. It slid and stopped right in front of me. "There is the non-disclosure agreement you begged for," Marcus said, his voice dripping with absolute superiority. "Sign the last page. Then you are going to sit down, pull my laptop over, and type the decryption key into the terminal. Do not try anything stupid, Taylor. We are done playing your childish games." I let my shoulders slump forward, perfectly executing the final act of my performance. I allowed a single genuine tear of sheer emotional exhaustion to well up in my eyes and slide down my cheek. My hands shook visibly as I picked up the pen. "I just need to know one thing before I give this up. I said, letting my voice crack with artificial despair. Are you really going to sell my life's work to a foreign rival corporation? The algorithm I spent 3 years building from scratch? Mom, Dad, do you really agree to let him do this to me? I expected Marcus to jump in and defend his illegal business deal. I expected my parents to look away in shame. But the plot twist that unfolded next defied every single logical expectation I had about human decency. My father set his coffee cup down on the table. A wide, disturbingly proud smile spread across his wrinkled face. He looked at me not with guilt, but with the boastful pride of a ruthless businessman. "Let him do it," my father chuckled loudly, his voice echoing off the glass walls. "Taylor, who do you think found the buyer in the first place? Marcus is an idiot who barely knows how to use an email client. Your mother and I are the ones who reached out to the overseas contacts. We spent the last 3 weeks negotiating the final price with the foreign conglomerate." My mother chimed in, leaning forward with her eyes gleaming with absolute greed. "That is right, sweetie. And because we secured the buyer, we are taking a 20% commission off the top of the sale. It is going to pay for a beautiful retirement home in Florida. You should be happy for us. You can always just write another computer program, but we need this money now. Family comes first, remember?" The air in the room grew entirely still. My own parents, the people who had raised me, were loudly and proudly confessing to brokering the illegal sale of stolen, highly classified intellectual property to a foreign entity. They were actively conspiring to commit federal economic espionage just to secure a 20% cut for their retirement. They had no idea that every single vile, treacherous word of their proud confession was being broadcasted live in crystal-clear, high-definition audio directly to a team of heavily armed federal agents waiting less than 30 feet away. The echo of my father's disgusting confession hung heavily in the air of the glass conference room. They sat there practically vibrating with the anticipation of their stolen wealth, fully expecting me to break down and surrender my entire livelihood to them. That was the exact moment I stopped acting. The terrified trembling in my hands vanished instantly. My slumped shoulders pulled back, straightening my posture until I sat rigidly upright in the heavy leather chair. The single artificial tear that had been resting on my cheek was swiftly wiped away by the back of my hand. The pathetic, broken, submissive daughter they thought they had cornered ceased to exist. I looked across the wide mahogany table. The expression on my face was no longer one of defeat. It was a mask of absolute freezing ice. My mother blinked, a flicker of genuine confusion finally breaking through her greedy smile. She could sense the sudden drastic shift in the atmospheric pressure of the room, but her mind was entirely too slow to understand what it meant. I reached into the front pocket of my tailored blazer and retrieved a small, sleek black titanium drive. Marcus leaned forward immediately, his eyes widening with sheer unadulterated greed. He genuinely believed he was looking at the master decryption key to his financial salvation. He practically shoved his open laptop toward me across the polished wood, pointing eagerly at the keyboard. I did not say a single word to him. I simply took the titanium drive and slotted it firmly into the universal serial bus port on the side of his machine. Marcus watched the screen intently, expecting a standard password prompt or a loading progress bar to appear. Instead, the operating system entirely froze. The screen flickered wildly as the military-grade tracking malware I had hidden inside the decoy drive executed its final lethal protocol. A black command terminal forced its way to the very front of the display, and thousands of lines of aggressive white code began cascading down the screen infinitely faster than the human eye could ever read. It locked out every single administrative privilege Marcus possessed. The hardware cooling fans inside the laptop suddenly spun up to their maximum speed, howling loudly like a tiny jet engine as the processor was completely hijacked. It was not a decryption sequence. It was a localized, hard-coded override command. Less than 2 seconds later, the display flashed a blinding, violent crimson red. A massive, high-definition gold and blue seal materialized directly in the center of the screen, accompanied by stark, capitalized white text that read, "Property seized by the Federal Bureau of Investigation." Marcus opened his mouth to ask what I had done, but the words never left his throat. A deafening explosive crash violently shattered the quiet professional atmosphere of the executive center. The heavy frosted glass door of our conference room was kicked open with such immense overpowering physical force that the metal hinges practically screamed. Before my family could even turn their heads to look, a highly coordinated tactical team of federal cyber agents swarmed into the room. They were clad in heavy tactical gear and thick black bulletproof vests, moving with terrifying calculated speed. Weapons were instantly drawn and pointed directly at the four people sitting across from me. "Federal agents. Nobody move. Put your hands flat on the table right now," the lead tactical commander roared, his authoritative voice echoing off the glass walls like thunder. The sheer velocity and aggression of the raid was entirely paralyzing. As the armed agents aggressively secured the perimeter and physically forced Marcus out of his chair, a familiar figure casually strolled through the breached doorway. It was Vance. My brilliant defense attorney looked completely out of place among the heavily armed tactical team in his perfectly tailored three-piece charcoal suit. He walked with the relaxed, effortless swagger of a man who had already decisively won the war. He approached the large mahogany table and casually tossed an incredibly thick, densely printed stack of legal documents right next to Marcus's seized and glowing red laptop. "Good morning, everyone," Vance said, his voice smooth, highly analytical, and dripping with absolute professional disdain. "What you are looking at is a comprehensive federal indictment summary. The charges officially include grand larceny, wire fraud, felony witness intimidation, and my personal favorite, criminal conspiracy to commit international economic espionage. You are all facing entirely unbailable federal charges." The brutal reality of the situation finally crashed down on my family like a collapsing concrete building. Their smug, victorious arrogance was completely vaporized, replaced instantly by raw, unfiltered terror. My father turned a sickly shade of pale gray and physically collapsed, slipping entirely out of his comfortable chair and hitting the carpeted floor with a heavy thud. He began hyperventilating, his hands shaking violently as he looked up at me. "Taylor, please tell them this is a joke. Tell them it is a massive misunderstanding. We are your family," he wailed, his voice cracking in sheer panic. My mother fell to her knees right beside him. She clawed at the polished wood of the table, her designer artisan coffee spilling and ruining her expensive clothes. She sobbed so hard she could barely breathe, frantically pleading that they only wanted the best for me, that they were just confused older people who made a silly mistake. Harper, true to her incredibly selfish and cowardly nature, did not even try to help her husband. As an agent forcefully grabbed Marcus by the arms and shoved him against the wall, Harper backed away, pointing a trembling finger right at his chest. "It was all his idea," she screamed through ugly panicked tears. "Marcus forced us to do it. I did not know anything about foreign buyers. Please, you have to believe me. I am completely innocent." Marcus stared at his wife in total disbelief, his jaw practically unhinged, realizing that the woman he married was throwing him directly under the bus the very second their horrific plan collapsed. I stood up from my chair, slowly moving with deliberate, total calm. I reached over and picked up my leather purse, completely ignoring the chaotic, pathetic symphony of their desperate screaming and crying. I walked around the edge of the large table and stopped right in front of them. The federal agents paused for just a brief moment, allowing me my final word. I looked down at the four people who shared my blood, the people who had actively tried to destroy my entire life and sell my future without a single ounce of hesitation. I felt absolutely nothing for them. No anger, no sadness, just total cleansing emptiness. "Enjoy federal prison," I said, my voice sharp, perfectly steady, and completely merciless. "Do not forget, you said it yourselves just 5 minutes ago. Business has no room for family." I turned my back to them and walked steadily toward the exit. I did not look back, not even once, as the sharp metallic clicks of heavy steel handcuffs echoing behind me signaled the absolute and permanent end of their freedom. Exactly 6 months later, the heavy gavel of the federal justice system finally fell, bringing our nightmare to a definitive and highly satisfying conclusion. Marcus stood before a federal judge and was sentenced to a mandatory 15 years in a federal penitentiary for wire fraud and criminal conspiracy to commit economic espionage. He cried openly in the courtroom, but no one offered him a single shred of sympathy. Harper managed to avoid a prison cell by eagerly testifying against her own husband, but her cowardly betrayal did not save her career. She received 5 years of strict federal probation, and the judge permanently revoked every single one of her financial and corporate working licenses. She will never legally work in the business sector again. But the most profound and thoroughly deserved poetic justice was reserved entirely for my mother and father, because they had proudly and audibly confessed on a direct federal wiretap to acting as the primary international brokers for the sale of stolen intellectual property. The United States government showed them absolutely zero mercy. Under federal asset forfeiture laws, the government moved swiftly and aggressively. They seized my parents' entire estate, their retirement bank accounts, their investment portfolios, and their beautiful suburban house were all completely confiscated by the authorities to pay for their massive federal fines. Today, the two arrogant people who were perfectly willing to destroy their own daughter's life for a luxury Florida retirement are living in a tiny, run-down public housing apartment. They survive solely on a meager monthly government welfare stipend, completely stripped of the wealth they worshipped. Meanwhile, my life took an entirely different trajectory. Back at Nexus Core Dynamics, the board of directors was profoundly grateful. Not only had I successfully protected our most valuable strategic artificial intelligence asset, but the digital evidence my decoy drive collected allowed the Federal Bureau of Investigation to completely dismantle the rival corporate espionage ring. The company rewarded my loyalty and quick thinking with an enormous life-changing financial bonus and an immediate promotion to the executive board. I did not let that money just sit in a bank account. I used a large portion of it to upgrade our home security system to the absolute highest military-grade standard available to civilians, ensuring no one would ever breach our safe haven again. More importantly, I took an entire large room in our house and converted it into a state-of-the-art technology laboratory just for Chloe. We spent weeks building a custom machine together that was 10 times more powerful and beautiful than the one they had violently destroyed. Watching her bright smile as she booted up her new system completely healed the lingering painful wounds of that horrible Friday afternoon. Shortly after the trial, Chloe and I permanently changed our phone numbers. We cut off every single remaining tie to the toxic, greedy individuals who used to call themselves our family. We stepped out of their dark shadows and built a life entirely defined by peace, total freedom, and massive prosperity. Blood is never a get-out-of-jail-free card for cruelty. When the people you call family look at you and see nothing but a goldmine to excavate, and when they are perfectly willing to stomp all over your personal boundaries, you cannot fight them with tears, compromises, or forgiveness. The only way to win is to strip away every single ounce of their hope using the sharpest, most unforgiving weapons available, the absolute power of the law and complete freezing coldness. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. We hope you enjoyed it. As an ad-free channel, your support is what keeps us alive. Please support Haley Revenge Stories with just $1 via the QR code on the screen or click the link in the description box or pinned comment. Also, we'd love to connect with you. Please leave a comment telling us which city or state you're listening from. Thank you for standing with us, and see you in the next stories.